So, you might remember a video I made last year about one habit that I wanted to build for 2021. It was a really simple habit, but it was one that was super important to me. I wanted to read more. Growing up, I hated reading. I hated it so much that when I was in middle school, instead of doing my required reading, I'd just pretend to read. I'd scan my fingers over the words and blankly stare at the pages. And I just hoped to God that I wouldn't get tested on it later. You know, looking back, maybe it was undiagnosed ADD, or maybe I just didn't like being told what to care about. All I know is that I didn't pick up the habit of reading until well into college. But once my curiosity sparked, it was impossible to stop. I read books on personal finance, meditation, and fitness. I read fiction and nonfiction, biographies, and crime dramas. These books taught me so many lessons that I applied to my creative work, my business, and my life. But then, as quickly as I started, I stopped. I got busy in the same way that we all get busy. I was working on my career, I was making my first feature documentary, I was hanging out with some Australian girl that I was sure was just a fling. Reading took a backseat in my life. That is until early last year when I decided to pick it back up again. And so in this video, I want to talk about all the new lessons I've learned over the past year of reading. But first, this video is brought to you by Canva. So if you haven't heard of Canva before, it's an amazing design platform that makes designing anything really easy. So I first started using them about 6 years ago back in my freelance filmmaking days to help me build really beautiful pitch decks that helped me to land some of my biggest clients. Since then, they've added so many amazing features to Canva Pro that makes it super intuitive to bring any of your designs to life. If you're creating social posts, their magic resize tool makes it easy to format your designs to fit natively for any social platform. Their background remover tool really comes in handy. Just one click and backgrounds are gone. It's even got a content planner, so you can load your social content ahead of time and schedule to post directly to Instagram, Facebook, and other platforms. You can team up and save with Canva Pro. For just $12.95 per month for up to 5 people, you and your team can unlock everything Pro has to offer. Plus, you can get a free 45-day extended trial by going to canva.me/MattDiabella. Click the link down in the description below to get started. So I had the goal to read 24 books last year, and I read a total of 16. I failed. I'm a total failure, what can I say? Now, in the past, I definitely would have been discouraged by this. I would have considered myself a failure, but I'm stoked about the amount of books that I read because it's 16 more books than I read in 2020. And goals aside, the fact that I've been able to rebuild this habit of reading is amazing because I've gotten so much and I've learned so much that I want to share with you in this video. And so let's get into some of these books. I'm gonna save my very favorite book of the year until the very end because then you have to stick around and watch the whole video, unless you skip ahead. Don't do that. The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. I started out the year reading one of my favorite books, The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. I was in a bit of a creative slump at the beginning of the year. I was getting a bit burnt out making videos and courses and all the other stuff that I do. And I was losing some of the excitement for my work. And this is the exact book that I needed. If you want to create anything meaningful in life, you need to overcome that voice in your head. It's the voice that tells you that you're not good enough, that you'll never amount to anything. It's the voice that says, who are you to start a YouTube channel? Pressfield calls it the resistance. As he writes in his book, the more scared we are of a work or calling, the more sure we can be that we have to do it. The big takeaway that I got from this book is that you always have to have your go-to pick-me-ups. This book is one that I've read 5, maybe 6 times, and whenever I'm in a slump, I read this book to get inspired, and it was definitely the right book for me to read at the beginning of the year. Good to Great by Jim Collins. So this is a book about how some businesses thrive while others remain stagnant. And I got 2 takeaways from this book. First, focus on hiring the right people first. When you hire the right people, so many other things will fall into place. If you don't find the right people, then things can completely go astray. And I learned something else as well. I picked this book up because I'm growing my own business at slow growth, but I realized through reading this book that I don't want to have one of the biggest or most profitable companies in the world. Like, yeah, I want a profitable company. I want a company that people love the content we make and the courses, the products, all that stuff. But That's not as important as building a really small, dedicated team that's super passionate about what they do. He does talk about this at the end of the book. It's this idea that you don't have to be big to be great, and you can apply these processes and these ideas to it. The Barefoot Investor by Scott Pape. This is a book by an Aussie. It's called The Barefoot Investor. I don't know what the barefoot part is. He didn't explain that in the book, at least not that I can remember. There's feet everywhere. Maybe he's got a foot thing. That's cool. I'm not judging. I mean, can't say that. I'm gonna say it. I think the biggest takeaway I got from this book came in the form of a question, and it's why retire? Now, it's one thing to retire from a job that you hate, but if you're lucky enough to find something that fulfills you and that keeps your mind active, it's not such a bad idea to work by choice when you're older. And that's something that he questions in this book that I think is something worth considering. Willpower by John Tierney and Roy Baumeister. Willpower is the thing that gets us off our ass or restrains our impulses from grabbing that next donut. While recent studies have called into question some of the claims in the book about willpower, specifically the fact that it operates like a muscle, it did give me a greater awareness for how my own mind works. You have a finite amount of willpower every day, and both stress and fatigue play a large role in how much willpower you'll have in each moment. It's the reason you might be more likely to get into an argument with your partner after a really stressful day at work. By understanding when we're likely to have our willpower drained, we can do a better job at staying committed to our goals for the long run. Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I can say that this book definitely renewed my love for fiction. I read fiction mostly to escape. It's really the one place that I can get away from a screen and get immersed into a story. Oftentimes when I'm reading nonfiction, it feels like work. My mind is active. I'm thinking about all the ways that I might apply this new thinking to my life or business, but fiction is totally different. I can slow down, I can read for an hour or two before bed, and I can forget about all my tasks, my priorities and deadlines, and just get lost in a great book. And this is one that I certainly got lost in, and if you're looking for a great fiction book, I definitely recommend it. Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. This book chronicles the early struggles and eventual rise of Nike. I probably read Shoe Dog faster than any other book that I read this year, and there were just so many lessons that I pulled from its pages. My favorite, don't tell people how to do things, tell them what to do, and let them surprise you with their results. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, oh my God, a minimalist reading a book about Nike? That's not cool. I thought we didn't like companies. And that's stupid, I think, to think. Nothing wrong with reading a book about Nike. Obviously, Nike is not a perfect company, but this book is really more about like the origin story, how Nike started, and the many lessons that were learned by Phil Knight and their team along the way. And I think there are many lessons that any entrepreneur or business owner can pull from this. Super inspiring. Highly recommend it. The Ultimate Guide to Real Estate by John McGrath. Aussies are serious about two things: coffee and real estate. Australia has one of the highest rates of home ownership in the world at around 66 to 67%. Since my mother-in-law and father-in-law keep pressuring us to buy a house, I thought, hey, let me read this book. Let me learn about it. And then maybe Lynn and Bill, you can just let it go. I'm kidding. You guys are amazing. Love you. You know, we're going to buy a house. It's okay. It's going to take a minute. I'm going to get in trouble. When you're going to buy a house, almost all homes in Australia are sold via auction. So you literally walk into a home, I think they give you like a paddle, and you're with a bunch of other potential home buyers, and you start bidding until the bidding stops. If we get to the point and we're throwing up that paddle at one of these auctions, yeah, I'll have a panic attack. In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. So this book tells the story of Yeonmi Park, who grew up in North Korea in the 90s and faced famine, poverty, and fear while living under communist control. It's really a heartbreaking story, but it's also a hopeful story of how she was able to escape from North Korea and eventually make her way to South Korea and the United States. One passage in the book stands out to me more than anything else. In the free world, children dream about what they want to be when they grow up and how they can use their talents. When I was 4 and 5 years old, my only adult ambition was to buy as much bread as I liked and eat all of it. There were many points throughout this book that had me in tears. It gave me a greater appreciation for all the things that we take for granted. And as we often get caught up in trivial problems, it helped me to put my own troubles into perspective. I definitely recommend that you check this one out. Traction by Gabrielle Weinberg and Justin Mars. So this book was recommended by your favorite British YouTuber, Ali Abdaal. And you know, when somebody that I respect and admire recommends a book, I will always write it down and I will always get it. For me, this book was a good reminder of the balance between, when it comes to business, product and marketing. Traction makes the case that most companies fail because they focus too much time on the product and not enough time on marketing. And in this book, there's a collection of a bunch of different tactics and strategies to increase your own customer growth. Definitely a great resource, and one I'll be coming back to in the future to get different ideas for marketing in different channels and platforms as my business grows. The Law of Innocence and Fair Warning by Michael Connolly. So I'm gonna group these two books together because I'm gonna be quite honest, I don't remember the difference between them. And that's not a bad thing. I actually love Michael Connolly. I find his books really easy to read. They're even easier to get into, which is great. I think the takeaway here for you is that you shouldn't be pretentious about the books that you read. You shouldn't read a book because of what other people will think of you when they see you holding that book. You should read a book because you enjoy it, because you truly find it fulfilling, or you find some value from it. It's a personal connection between you, the book, and the author, and don't let anybody else get in between that. The Bomber Mafia by Malcolm Gladwell. I love history and I love Malcolm Gladwell, so this was a perfect combination. I can't say that I took away any lessons about precision bombing versus firebombing that I could apply to my own life, but Gladwell is an inspiring author, creator, and podcaster, and to me this was really a reminder that the best stories are those rarely told, and the best insights come only after you start looking for answers. Memorial Drive by Natasha Trethewey. Like a few other books that I read this year, it definitely had me in tears throughout. The book retraces Natasha's life from the moment everything changed when, at 19 years old, her mother was killed by her stepfather. It talks about racism, abuse, and how one moment can have a ripple effect on the rest of your life. If you're looking for a really good book by a Pulitzer Prize-winning poet, this is the one. Will by Will Smith. You know the YouTuber Will Smith? Apparently before he started his channel, he was not only a movie star, he had a television show and a music career. I mean, it's crazy. Like, if I didn't read this book, I never would have known all that. My big takeaway from this book is that what you see on the surface is only a glimpse into the reality. The greatest artists in the world struggle with anxiety, fear, and failure like the rest of us, but their falls are much greater. As Will Smith's grandmother told him as he went off for his first music tour, be careful how you treat people on your way up, because you might have to pass them again on your way down. Effortless by Greg McKeown. So Greg's new book argues that sometimes we make life harder than it needs to be. As a culture at large, we've conflated difficult and hard with being good and better, but that's not always the case. And he begs us to ask the question, what if this was effortless? This thing that I'm grinding it out, I'm working so hard at, what if there was an easier way to get this done? And there are so many great stories and anecdotes and examples of how other people have achieved the effortless life. Definitely a great book. I actually just did an interview with Greg, and so I'm gonna be releasing that in the coming weeks. So if you haven't subscribed, subscribe to this channel, and then you'll get that video as well, which is very good. My favorite quote from the book that I just thought was fantastic is a rule, and it goes like this. Do not do more today than you can completely recover from by tomorrow. Great rule, something to live by. So all the books that I mentioned in this video are fantastic and worth reading, but there's one that really pulled me in more than any other, and it is my favorite book of the year. That book is One Bright Moon by Andrew Kwong. While we were living in Australia last year, I walked into a bookstore near my gym and browsed through the autobiography section, And I didn't know what it was about this book that caught my attention, but I grabbed it and I'm glad I did. This, again, was a very heavy book, but a really important read. Andrew was only 7 years old when he witnessed his first execution. The book follows his life as he lived through famine and fear and propaganda in China during the middle of the 20th century, how his father was banished to a re-education camp, and how his family was pulled apart again and again throughout his life and adolescence. It's one of those books that stays with you for weeks, months after reading it. And while I recommend every single book in this pile here, if you're gonna get started on just one, if you really love biographies, I definitely recommend you read One Bright Moon. And so that is everything I learned from everything I read last year. I'm gonna keep this reading habit alive this year. And so let me know down in the comments below if you have any recommendations for books that you think I should read. I can't wait to hear from you down there in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Ugh.